has always been about.
It's also why your league has always been a huge embarrassing failure. It's also why your league has always been rejected.
We are witnessing what should be the triumphant golden age of professional women's basketball, yet the foundation is cracking under the weight of its own historical baggage. It is the summer of 2026, and the Women's National Basketball Association is currently experiencing unprecedented record-shattering attention.
What's going on with AT? It's absolutely unacceptable. There's been so much more toxicity, racism, homophobia. It is absolutely unacceptable. Most of this coming from the online community. Most of this, in my heart of hearts, I believe.
Millions of eyes are suddenly locked onto a product that, for decades, lingered in the dark, ignored corners of the American sports landscape. But behind the packed arenas, the flashy television deals, and the relentless media hype, the cracks behind the scenes are beginning to fracture the entire product. The league is currently facing its biggest internal crisis yet, and it is a crisis entirely of its own making. This is not a story about a lack of talent. It is not a story about a lack of audience potential. This is a blistering takedown of a league that is fundamentally refusing to understand the basic laws of sports entertainment, consumer demand, and star protection. The core issue isn't just the toxic comments online, nor is it the fierce rivalries developing on the hardwood.
So I believe that this is people who are using our league, using our players to further divisive agendas. And if you are one of these people that are online doing this, do not call yourself a WNBA fan. Our league is about inclusiveness. Our league is about competition. Our league is about elevating women, elevating marginalized communities.
The true breaking point arriving this season is how the league's leadership, from the commissioner's office down to the head coaches, is completely, perhaps deliberately, mismanaging their sudden popularity. As the physical toll on the court threatens to derail everything the league has built over the last 3 years, the executives and coaching staffs are prioritizing cultural lectures over the absolute necessity of protecting their sole generational asset.
That was Indiana Clark's head coach Stephanie White discussing the brutal, vicious attack on Caitlin Clark by Al Thomas. Now, as you just saw, instead of Steph White coming to the defense of her only star player, the
central tension of this unfolding disaster is impossible to ignore, and it is perfectly encapsulated by the baffling, deeply alienating strategy of the Indiana Fever's coaching staff. Let us examine the recent, highly controversial press conference delivered by Indiana head coach Stephanie White. She stepped up to the podium not to discuss pick-and-roll coverages, not to detail how she plans to adjust her offensive schemes to counter the brutal, hyper-aggressive physical defense her team is facing, and certainly not to demand that the league's referees protect her marquee franchise player.
League? Uncle Casey, that's not true. What about Angel Reese? What about Paige Buckner? The WNBA is no longer reliant on Caitlin Clark. This league is filled with huge stars.
Line in the sand against her own team's new fan base. Addressing the media, White delivered a passionate, scolding lecture regarding what she characterized as absolute unacceptability within the online community. She cited rampant toxicity, mythical racism, and homophobia. She proclaimed with total righteous indignation that this hostility was not coming from true WNBA fans.
Yesterday, or maybe it was Wednesday, make-believe basketball was one of the questions on Jeopardy! Now, this was not Celebrity Jeopardy where a trio of dorks combined their collective brain cell to figure out the identity of one of the Kardashians. This was real Jeopardy!
In her view, the people criticizing the brutal, vicious attacks on Caitlin Clark by players like Alicia Thomas are simply using the league to further divisive, exclusionary agendas. White stared directly into the cameras and declared, "If you are one of these people that are online doing this, do not call yourself a WNBA fan. Our league is about inclusiveness. Our league is about competition. Our league is about elevating marginalized communities." This was not a coach defending her star player. This was a coach defending a political ideology at the direct expense of the very demographic keeping her sport financially viable. Critics immediately seized upon this moment, pointing out the glaring, almost tragic irony of the situation. That was Indiana's head coach discussing the brutal, vicious physical targeting of Caitlin Clark. Yet as the world saw, instead of Stephanie White coming to the ferocious defense of her only star player, the only player on the roster and perhaps in the league who can single-handedly sell out a stadium, she focused entirely on policing social media commentary. The coach is leaning heavily into the league's historic 30-year identity of social activism and inclusivity. But what she fails to realize is that critics argue this intense, unwavering focus on off-court narratives and cultural sermonizing is exactly why the league struggled to capture mainstream American sports fans for nearly 3 decades.
Showed a picture of Paige Beckers, who the media claims is one of the faces of the WNBA. The same Paige Beckers who can't fill a 7,000-seat pavilion with tickets selling for less than 10 Ethiopian breadcrumbs. They show a picture of Paige Beckers without her partner Elmer Fudd, which might be why the contestants on Jeopardy had such a hard time figuring out who in the hell she was.
Stephanie White is actively alienating the massive, highly lucrative new fan base brought in by her own superstar player by labeling their very standard sports criticisms as external toxicity. Instead of building a protective scheme around the player generating the revenue, the focus remains entirely on demonizing the Caitlin Clark fanbase. She is essentially complaining about unknown WNBA players having to deal with criticism on social media, or as Angel Reese would dismissively call it, dealing with those haters.
Rahul.
Who is Caitlin Clark?
No. Scott or Sarah?
When players like Alicia Thomas engage in highly aggressive, borderline reckless physical altercations on the floor, the internal defense mechanism of the league is never to punish the enforcer. It is to deflect the conversation away from basketball, away from dirty plays, and onto complex cultural grievances. This has led to massive, undeniable speculation about a deep, perhaps irreparable locker room divide between the coaching staff and the players who actually draw the crowds. Reports indicate that key players, including Caitlin Clark and veteran Sophie Cunningham, are visibly frustrated with questionable tactical rotations, poor game management, and a stunning lack of direct, vocal support from the bench.
The smart people on Jeopardy have no idea who in the hell Paige Beckers is. Outside of Caitlin Clark, they can't name another player in the WNBA dump. Which is why I'm struggling to understand why her own head coach refuses to come to her defense. Instead of defending the Great White Hope, Steph White is delivering a passionate sermon on mythical racism and homophobia. She is demonizing the Caitlin Clark fan base, or as Steph White called them, WNBA fans.
From a business perspective, the failure of a coach to protect the only players people are willing to pay to see is not just poor management, it is gross negligence. To deflect from the obvious reality that the league's sudden financial windfall is due entirely to one singular athlete, the mainstream sports media has spent the last 2 years desperately attempting to manufacture a multi-star ecosystem. Turn on any major network, read any major sports publication, and the establishment narrative insists that the WNBA is no longer reliant on Caitlin Clark. They loudly proclaim that the league is filled with superstars of equal magnitude. The establishment desperately wants the American public to believe that players like Reese or the highly touted 2025 #1 draft pick Paige Beckers carry the exact same cultural and commercial weight as Clark. They want to sell the illusion that the sport has achieved broad, structural popularity that transcends any one individual. To test whether this multi-star narrative was actually true outside the insulated, echoing sports media bubble, the ultimate cultural litmus test occurred on national television just days ago. It did not happen on ESPN. It did not happen on a sports podcast. It happened on the legendary television game show Jeopardy! This was not Celebrity Jeopardy, where a trio of Hollywood actors combine their collective brain cells to figure out the identity of a pop singer. This was Standard Jeopardy, featuring some of the sharpest, most well-read, highly educated trivia minds in the country. A clue was presented on the iconic blue board regarding the top tier of women's basketball talent. The show displayed a clear, high-definition image of Paige Beckers, the Connecticut collegiate legend who was picked first overall in the 2025 WNBA draft, the very player the media continuously frames as the next big face of professional basketball. The live reaction from the contestants exposed the massive, undeniable gap between media hype and actual public recognition. A contestant eagerly buzzed in and confidently guessed, Asterisk, who is Caitlin Clark? When told no, another contestant stumbled, guessing randomly, who is Skylar Sawa? Not a single one of these brilliant individuals had any earthly idea who Paige Buchers was. They showed a picture of the media's supposed co-face of the league, and the smartest people in the room drew a complete blank. The contestants immediately guessed Caitlin Clark, unequivocally proving that the general public only recognizes one singular name in this entire sport. Outside of that one individual, the rest of the league remains completely invisible to the average American viewer. Not only do the smart people on Jeopardy have no idea who in the hell Paige Buchers is, but outside of Caitlin Clark, they couldn't name a single other active player in the WNBA if their lives depended on it. This entirely shatters the mainstream narrative. It proves that the same Paige Buchers who the media claims is carrying the league alongside Clark still struggles to fill a 7,000-seat pavilion on a Tuesday night. So why is her own head coach refusing to come to her defense? Why is the league trying to push alternative stars? They can claim all they want that A'ja Wilson is the most valuable player. They can give her the MVP awards, they can put her on the promotional posters, and they can try to force her as the face of the league, but no one outside the hardcore bubble believes it. You could poll people at a family reunion and they wouldn't know who A'ja Wilson is. The league refuses to acknowledge the stark reality of their own business model. To truly understand why the public response to the WNBA is so incredibly polarized, and why the executives are behaving with such stunning arrogance, you have to look directly at the underlying business model. Let's take a second to think of some logical math-based reasons as to why unknown WNBA players would harbor such intense resentment, and why the WNBA possesses a 30-year history of huge, embarrassing financial failure. For nearly 3 decades, the league has operated under financial conditions that simply do not exist, and would never be tolerated in any other professional sports entertainment industry on the planet. From an economic standpoint, the WNBA has functioned almost like a communist league. For the better part of its existence, this enterprise failed to generate a single cent in independent profit. They were and still heavily remain subsidized by the NBA. The hard financial reality is that millions of dollars are transferred annually from men's basketball revenues just to keep the women's teams afloat. If you factor in the intricate details of their television deals and shared operating costs, the NBA has essentially been donating hundreds of millions of dollars every single year to keep the WNBA charity running. Because they never had to survive on the merits of their own ticket sales or their own television ratings, the league developed a culture entirely devoid of financial accountability. Meanwhile, the vast majority of players in this league could not draw flies to a fresh picnic. Without the NBA's backing, they would have been financially worthless in the free market of sports entertainment. Yet because their paychecks cleared regardless of whether the arenas were empty or full, the WNBA prided itself on being an activist league. They intentionally focused on social activism over the quality of basketball. If you watch tape from the last 2 decades, critics point out that it wouldn't take long to figure out that the core product on the floor historically suffered. When an organization prioritizes political messaging, when players spend significant portions of their public platforms focusing on external social causes, like flying flags at parades or lecturing the country on its perceived moral failings, rather than mastering the elite athletic development required to entertain paying fans, the quality of play drops. The product on the court became sluggish, fundamentally flawed, and frankly, unwatchable for the masses. The rampant entitlement, the constant lecturing of the fan base, and the outward appearance that some players harbored a severe dislike for the very country that afforded them their platform created a toxic barrier to entry for the mainstream consumer. But according to executives and coaches like Steph White, the failure to draw an audience was never about missed layups, poor fundamentals, or a lack of star power. It was always the fans' fault. It was mythical racism. It was homophobia. The narrative was that fans were somehow terrified of players like Brittany Griner. But the reality is, as long as you aren't carrying contraband through a foreign airport, nobody is afraid of Brittany Griner. The public simply wasn't interested in paying top dollar to watch a substandard athletic product wrapped in a political lecture. This constant deflection to external social issues creates a total vacuum of accountability within the franchises. High-profile figures become central talking points for off-court controversies, while the actual basketball operations and declining on-court metrics are completely ignored. Stephanie White herself oversaw a noticeable decline during her previous coaching tenure at Vanderbilt University, single-handedly destabilizing a once-winning program. Now, those exact same structural issues, a lack of accountability, poor rotations, and a focus on off-court distractions, are playing out on the professional stage in Indiana. The utter lack of operational discipline and the league's refusal to protect its golden goose has manifested into a very real, terrifying physical crisis in the summer of 2026. The real breaking point this season isn't just the press conferences. It is when the physical toll on the court threatens to derail the health of the one player keeping the lights on. For 3 years, the WNBA has allowed jealous, hyper-aggressive players to unleash their pent-up rage towards Caitlin Clark. And for the most part, WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert hasn't done a damn thing about it. The league seems to be treating standard sports rivalries as an opportunity for enforcers to take cheap shots, all while masking these dangerous plays as tough physical defense. This is not a conspiracy theory, it is a documented medical reality. Earlier this week, major national news outlets spoke with a highly respected former sports medicine doctor who used to work closely with the Philadelphia 76ers. This was not a low-level trainer. This was a physician who spent years dealing with the biomechanics and trauma of elite, world-class athletes. His assessment was a dire warning to the WNBA. Caitlin Clark is taking far too much sustained, intentional physical contact. The doctor pointed specifically to the tape. He highlighted the brutal moment Alicia Thomas struck Clark near the throat. He pointed to the eye pokes, the constant, uncalled hits to the face, and most dangerously, the incredibly reckless closeouts. Jealous, aggressive defenders are repeatedly and purposefully putting their feet into Clark's landing space when she attempts her signature step-back three-point shots. In the NBA, the Zaza Pachulia rule made this an automatic flagrant foul because of the catastrophic risk to a shooter's ankles and knees. In the WNBA, it is treated as a routine play. According to these medical reports, there have been at least 13 distinct instances of highly controversial, highly dangerous physical contact aimed directly at Caitlin Clark since her rookie year in 2024. You have to remember the timeline. She missed the majority of the 2025 season rehabilitating from a severe injury caused by this exact type of wear and tear. Now, we are barely 2 months into the 2026 season, and the nightmare scenario has returned. Caitlin Clark is once again sidelined, suffering from a recurrence of the exact same debilitating back injury. 13 instances of catastrophic contact in an incredibly tight window of actual playing time. As any medical professional will tell you, the human body does not magically heal its structural foundations as it ages. The cumulative trauma of blindside screens, flagrant fouls, and heavy falls to the hardwood takes a permanent toll. Back problems do not simply vanish, they compound. And in the face of this existential threat to the league's survival, what is her head coach focused on? Instead of violently slamming her fist on the scorer's table, instead of publicly demanding that the WNBA officiate the games fairly and take better care of its most valuable financial asset, Steph White is standing at a podium lecturing Clark's fans about the importance of inclusivity. She is focused on solving the world's ideological problems while her star player's spine is literally absorbing the punishing cost of the league's incompetence. If you want to see how dire the situation is, look at how the wider sports landscape treats this league. When is the last time you heard anyone in the traditional, mainstream sports media actually talking about the mechanical execution of a WNBA basketball game? There's a thriving underground of independent digital creators and YouTube channels that provide constant, dedicated coverage. They livestream the games. They break down the intricate X's and O's. They show the tape, explaining in agonizing detail what happens when Caitlin Clark threads a brilliant needlepoint pass through traffic, only for one of her unknown, less talented teammates to inexplicably miss a wide-open layup or fumble the basketball out of bounds into the front row. These creators watch because their specific audience demands it. But the major daily sports shows on networks like ESPN or Fox Sports 1 operate on a completely different set of metrics. How often do you hear top-tier analysts like Colin Cowherd spending a 20-minute A-block breaking down the on-court product of the WNBA? You don't. The harsh reality of the television business is that the WNBA only cuts through the noise of the NFL, the NBA, or Major League Baseball when an off-court controversy explodes. This league only makes national headlines when someone physically assaults Caitlin Clark, or when a coach goes on a bizarre political rant. In the short term, utilizing controversy to generate interest can be a highly effective marketing strategy. In the business of television, you do whatever it takes to get eyeballs on the screen. But relying strictly on viral drama and physical altercations to sustain television ratings is an incredibly dangerous, totally unsustainable long-term business model. It is unsustainable because the very controversy that is generating the interest involves the physical destruction of the athlete driving the ratings. If the drama requires Caitlin Clark to be battered to the point of a career-ending back injury, there will be no product left to sell once she is gone. Right now, the WNBA is standing on the precipice of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, yet they are squandering it through sheer stubbornness. To understand how utterly foolish their strategy is, one only needs to look at the basic principles of brand protection. 5 years ago, in the summer of 2021, I was given my own once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I could feel my independent media channel gaining massive traction and momentum, but I was exhausted, wasting 50 hours a week at a miserable corporate job. I took a massive risk, quit my job, and seized the opportunity. But over the last 5 years, the defining characteristic of my success hasn't just been content creation, it has been absolute ruthless protection of my brand. I have done everything in my power to protect the core mechanism that drives my growth. For instance, I recognized early on that integrating short-form content, shorts, onto a long-form channel could cannibalize the algorithm. The audiences are fundamentally different. People who swipe through 15-second videos generally do not have the attention span to watch deep, analytical, long-form content. To me, chasing cheap, momentary views wasn't worth the existential risk of tanking my core channel with dead subscribers who wouldn't engage with my primary product. Instead, I compartmentalized. I pushed short-form content to TikTok or Facebook and planned a completely separate channel for YouTube Shorts. I protected the golden goose. Every successful business owner, every successful media brand understands this fundamental rule. You must relentlessly shield your primary asset from structural damage. When platforms dilute their core content, or when they openly antagonize their paying customers, they destroy their long-term momentum. So I am struggling to understand why a multi-million-dollar corporation like the WNBA lacks this basic elementary business mindset. You have exactly one star. You have exactly one player that moves the needle, sells the merchandise, spikes the television ratings, and puts butts in the seats. Why would you allow jealous rivals to beat her into the ground? Why would you allow your coaching staff to alienate her fans? There is a reason the phrase, "the Great White Hope," is so often applied to Caitlin Clark, and despite what the media pundits want to scream about. It has very little to do with her race, it has everything to do with economics. The reason Caitlin Clark is the Great White Hope is because she represents the absolute final economic lifeline for a professional sports league that has teetered on the edge of complete cultural irrelevance for 30 years. She is the WNBA's only hope of achieving true financial independence from the NBA. And for some inexplicable reason, the league refuses to acknowledge it. They refuse to protect her on the floor. They refuse to defend her fanbase in the press. They allow coaches like Stephanie White to prioritize abstract cultural lectures over fixing a broken offense. They allow a locker room divide to fester, where veteran players openly disrespect the rookie who is solely responsible for their chartered flights and their newfound chartered relevance. If the league office, Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, and the coaching staffs around the country continue to prioritize their 30-year habit of social activism over basic player protection, they will permanently break the only engine driving their success. If Caitlin Clark's back gives out because the WNBA refused to call a flagrant foul, the fans will leave, the TV networks will pull their massive offers, and the league will immediately sink back into the subsidized obscurity from which it came. Is the WNBA intentionally sabotaging its own historic growth out of sheer, unadulterated jealousy? Or is this simply the most catastrophic failure of institutional leadership in the history of modern sports? The tape is out there, the injuries are real. The silence from the front office is deafening. Sound off in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button to support independent sports media that actually tells you the truth, and I will see you guys tomorrow.